We'll now be in conversation just to unpack some of the testimony that we've heard so far. We now bring in, just for his reflections, political analyst Bongani Mahlangu. Bongani, a very good afternoon to you. So, of course, a slow start to the morning as MPs had to deliberate around some of the concerns there around potential conflict of interest. Let's get your sense then of just how today's proceedings began with that question of the potential and the conflict of interest involving the MK parties, David Skhosana. We know, of course, that the DA too has had, to deliberate and reflect on just some of the members that had launched criminal charges against, some of those that are appearing before the ad hoc committee. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Bongani, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Let's just get your reflections, Bongani, just on some of the proceedings that we've seen now, in as far as how the ad hoc committee began its proceedings with those questions of conflicts of interest.
No, thanks. So if we look at it, I think from the first questions from the senior counsel, it was basically trying to establish some logical background with regards to the individual's capacity, qualifications and experience, and also the delegated responsibilities to the individual. And I picked up that in most cases when asked, the individual would jump straight through in terms of over answering to cover what he anticipates will be asked, whether after that question was asked or later during the questioning. But so far, from what I saw, the questions rather were fair and are expected, and they are mostly straight to the point. So that means, because I think they would have said that they do not have the luxury of time with regards to the commission. I think they have a day or two for questioning of the individual. So hence, there's no dilly-dallying. So I think that's appreciated to some extent.
And I think you've touched on the second part of my question, which was going to be around your impressions on Sibiya's testimony so far. But I want to just go back to what I'm asking you in the first question, and that is just the significance of having some members within the Parliament's ad hoc committee being asked to in some way or the other recuse themselves given the conflict of interest. And in particular, the reference being made here was around MK party's David Skhosana. Of course, we've heard from other members saying that it was, in fact, not David Skhosana's decision, to lay those charges, but rather the party in its entirety.
Yeah, no, to be honest, even though I think they did reach some form of agreement, but I'm not a legal expert. However, when you have lodged a case against someone, and then the same individual goes into such a process of an ad hoc committee, there is, whether real or perceived, sense of conflict of interest, because the expectation is that your line of questioning would be linked to the case that you would have launched against the individual. So then we cannot necessarily declare you as a neutral party, because by mere instance of you lodging a case, that means there is a certain misconduct that you either suspect and you would wish the SABC to then investigate further. Now the same person that you are suspecting of misconduct is before you. So chances are you're going to ask things that might even push the individual to implicate himself. So in the investigation that is also running concurrently, there is some tangibles there. So there, to be honest, even though they would have managed it politically, because the ad hoc committee is a political committee, but there is some sense, as I said, real or perceived sense of conflict of interest. And I think Skhosana should have, even before they got to that point, recused himself, because MK would be represented either way. So whatever questions he might have, we assume it are the questions of the party. then he would have also then delegated or gave someone else those questions in order for that someone else to ask. At least that someone else would not have a real or perceived conflict of interest, at least towards the individual.
Yeah. Mkhwanazi, I just want to pause our interview for now and just draw the attention to our viewers in terms of what's happening on the right screen, the right side of the screen there. What you are seeing there, of course, is U.S. President Donald Trump in conversation, it would seem, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Just moments ago, of course, we know that U.S. President Donald Trump is in Israel, where he has addressed the Knesset before heading to Egypt, where he's also expected to get a very warm reception there following that international summit, following that ceasefire deal brokered between Israel and Gaza. Of course, we see Trump seemingly making his way onto his aircraft. Of course, a very big development there in the Middle East. And on the other side of that, of course, 20 surviving hostages being held by Hamas have now been released over to Israel, marking this major step towards ending the 2-year conflict that we've seen there. Particularly, of course, the bombardment of Gaza. At the same time, buses carrying freed Palestinian detainees as part of the ceasefire and the hostage release deal have arrived in the Gaza Strip and the Israeli-occupied West Bank. So we'll keep our viewers, abreast in terms of when Trump arrives in Egypt and what his next steps are. A very big story developing there in the Middle East, of course, following that ceasefire agreement. We'll keep our viewers very much engaged on that. But let's then continue our conversation now with our political analyst, Bongani Mahlangu, who is on the line for us following the appearance of Lieutenant General Sibiya, who is suspended as SAP's head of crime detection at the ad hoc committee just moments ago. Bongani, as we continue our conversation, because we know, of course, the ad hoc committee is on a break and they will be coming back. It's a 30-minute break. This was taken about 5 minutes ago, so they will be coming back any moment now. Lieutenant General Sibiya also spoke about 2 individuals that have really made center of some of the allegations that General Mkhwanazi has been speaking about, and those are in reference, Kat Matlala as well as Brown Mokhosi, saying that he does know the individuals that were mentioned. Just what do you make of some of the testimony that he has then had to provide around these individuals, particularly when you see that there is somewhat of a commonality between what General Mkhwanazi has also said in as far as these individuals are concerned, in as far as providing some form of intelligence to them?
No, thanks. So basically, in such cases, you'd find that there could be part truths and whole lies, because they say the best place to hide a lie is between 2 truths. I'm not saying he's lying.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that when we speak about those common elements on the statements made by Mkhwanazi as the one that is accusing and by himself as the one that is defending himself, so he can't totally veer off. Because over and above whatever evidence, remember, there are certain things that even us, the public, do not know about. I think it's what even Mkhwanazi would have made reference to, that there were certain testimonies that were made in camera and certain parts of evidence that were presented there as well. And if those were to come public, then it would be a different conversation altogether. So I think he would also be cautious about that. He'd also be aware, conscious about that as well. And he would not totally veer off. So it would not be a 180-degree veering off. But then he would want to clarify as to what the linkages are and want to explain those. And I mentioned that deliberately because not necessarily about Kat Matlala or Katie Molefe and the guys that are currently being spoken about now, but there have been pictures in several locations on social media of the general taking pictures of either formerly convicted criminals that are now out or reformed and so forth, and so on. So controversial people that would have been in prison, that would have been arrested historically for cash heists and so forth, which is, he said, in his opening remarks would have been some of the responsibilities that he had when he held certain positions. So I think he's well aware that if he were to completely veer off, even such things might surface and might compromise his credibility or further compromise his credibility. Hence, he is careful as to what he's saying and how he's saying it. And also just to go back a little bit from that issue of conflict and so forth, I think also what is important when he started off his testimony today was that he is participating but under protest. So just in case there are certain issues as we go further down with this issue, that he would have declared or issued a disclaimer that is participating under protest.
Yeah, and I want to just reflect a little bit earlier on. We saw, of course, the Madlanga Commission also just not really getting its proceedings. It was highly anticipated that those proceedings would start today, but with some level of information in as far as holding some testimony in camera. That, of course, was stalled by the two media houses that brought that application to the Madlanga Commission, which is now adjourned again just to deliberate over whether or not the media and the public should be, privy to some of the information and the testimony that would otherwise have been heard in camera. What do you make of those developments within the Madlanga Commission?
Well, I think the media houses would be exercising their rights, and by virtue of having to pause whatever was scheduled for today, it just shows that there is locus standi, there is legal grounds for what they've done. However, when we look at it now generally, is that the Madlanga Commission might not necessarily meet its intended deadlines, its targets. And if that does not happen, then it would raise other issues and issues of terms of budget overruns, in terms of, so basically what we would have experienced with the Zondo Commission of budget overruns, going above the timeframes and so forth. And then after that, the recommendations come and those recommendations seemingly are not being implemented. So I think what they should be careful of at the Madlanga Commission, with the disruptions they've had, not just the one of today, even their lead evidence, their initial lead evidence chief having to resign, and another one having to be brought in, Khumalo falling ill, postponements and so forth. They must just be careful that whatever they had scheduled in their work plan must be there. And it will also not just put pressure on them as well and their credibility, but even the individual that would have established them being the president, because in several months from now is the State of the Nation address, would be the opening of Parliament, and certain feedbacks or certain reports must be given by him to the public with regards to the progress of the Madlanga Commission. So I'm just basically saying that what happened today, there's no problem as far as the legalities are concerned. However, the Commission must ensure that it meets its deadline within acceptable budget, and they provide proper and quality recommendations at the end of their lifespan.
All right, Bongani, thank you so much for your reflections. Bongani Mahlangu is a political analyst, and of course, thank you so much for your patience.